I'm Dipali. I have three questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, you said the politicians listen to the technocrats' advice or the economists only when the crises are at your door and they feel that they don't have any solution. And then once we are out of it or on the upsurge, they again start ignoring them. So how do you see making politicians listen to the advices which are given all the point of time and not just during the crisis? My second question is, you said Modi government made a right economic noise in 2014, but got major setback in 2015 Delhi election, and from there on they moved to become more political and not economical. So now that they have realized that they didn't lose the Modi wave and they have come back stronger, do you see them making any corrective measures in the near future and not going back into politics? I mean the political announcement. And the third question is, you said the public in India plays victim card a lot more and are more want to receive. So how do we make public more proactive in the development process, wherein they make politicians take right economic decision rather than compelling them to take a political decision? Thank you. I know there are a lot more.
Yeah. Sorry, your first question was?
Why do they listen them only when the crisis is striking?
Yeah. Like I said before, they listen, politicians and governments become sensitive to economic advice and technocrats only during times of crisis, because if they don't, they'll have egg on their face, you know. I think the memory of, what happened in 1991, where gold was taken out of the Reserve Bank of India, shipped overseas and mortgaged, was a national shame. And sometimes the impact of these things remains for a long time, and no government wants to be in a position where that happens. Now, India today, even if it's in a crisis, nothing of that sort can happen. But I think no politician or government wants to be even moving in that direction. And therefore, the one time that they become willing to listen to technocrats is when they're told that now we are close to a crisis. So they want to avoid the crisis. What can the Modi government now has no threat or opposition politically? Does that make it more sensitive to good economic advice, and does that bring economy back onto their agenda? I'm not seeing any signs of it. And I think I'm not seeing any signs of it because that's not what the voter wants. I think the voter has, in the last few state elections and the latest general election, made their mind very clear that economic hardships did not count at all. I don't think voters did not realize that the last 3 years of the Modi government's regime had put them through a lot of economic hardships. No matter what we hear on television, I think everybody knows the reality of demonetization, regardless of their political views, because it is their own lived experience. The problem of unemployment, where it's not just the incumbent government, but also successive governments which have failed to take the right decisions, are to be blamed, but this government has not done enough about it, unlike the expectations we had and unlike the promises that they made in the run-up to the campaign, prime ministerial campaign in 2014. So that promise has not been fulfilled. I think that realization even the most ardent supporter of the prime minister has. But those realizations are not weighing in their decision making and their voting behavior when they decide who to vote for. And the BJP knows that. They know that the voter is not going to vote on the basis of, or at least has in the recent past not voted on the basis of their economic experience. They are voting on the basis of their political preference and the political decisions taken by the government, national security, the narrative of wanting a strong prime minister, those things are more important in determining voter behavior, and therefore there is no pressure on the government to divert focus from this sort of a narrative and this sort of agenda. Should the next election is in Maharashtra, should that election throw up a message for the Modi government, which people in Maharashtra say is unlikely, but let's say there is an upset in Maharashtra, that might force or that might nudge the central government to apply itself to the economy's problems. But if the next state election also goes their way handsomely, there is no compulsion or pressure on them to change what they're doing, anything of what they're doing right now. So to answer the third question, what is it that people should do? I think the most important thing is to not fall for narratives which are designed to shape public opinion favorable for people who would like to control narrative, who stand to benefit by controlling narrative, by keeping ourselves informed, by taking voting decisions based on what matters to us and not what should happen in a state which is 500 kilometers away from where we live. And I mean, yesterday I was saying this to somebody that I don't understand why all of India is jumping so much about what's happening in Kashmir, because honestly, what difference does it make to my life?
Or Chidambaram.
Or Chidambaram. Chidambaram, well, he's been my finance minister, and therefore it had impact on our lives. But what is happening in Kashmir really makes no difference. But that road, outside my house, or the school, the government school to which my children go and study at, or whether a person youngster in my family is going to be able to find a job, or somebody's got fired, or I'm not getting a good enough increment. These things matter to my life, but somehow I'm falling prey to the narrative, and I'm saying that all of these things don't matter. but what happens in a state, where I will not really come in contact with, matters more.
I'm sure you have come across the WhatsApp joke that went around yesterday. The first question the CBI asks PC is, how do we fix the economy, or something along those lines. No, but in political science, there's a vast strand of literature on why and under what conditions do people vote against their interests. And when you think of interests, it can be defined in different ways. I mean, most of us would say that people give primacy to economic interests. Clearly, that's not the case, right? I mean, irrespective of whichever direction the economy may be taking, or the economic conditions are affecting me badly. But even then, I'm more concerned about this corrupt Chidambaram being arrested, and watching that on live television and feeling good about it. So the whole idea that there's a little story from Bihar, from my hometown actually, which I thought is very, very interesting. This is the high period of Lalu Raj in Bihar, and right in front of the railway station in a small town, during the monsoons you have water clogging and all those things, and this panwala guy who also sells cigarettes and other things, has a large portrait of Lalu there, which I was told has grown larger over time. So it used to be a small portrait, and then Lalu wins again, and then the portrait has become very large. So this guy asks the panwala is, why do you have this large portrait of Lalu and Mala when you look outside your shop? And things are terrible. This place has not been fixed, repaired. You don't have power supply. You don't have this or that. He says, look, the simple fact is Lalu has shown those guys that we are sometime. So it just doesn't matter. Economic interests do not necessarily have to matter, but somewhere you begin to wonder how far can this go? And you're right. I mean, because of Kashmir, if an election were to held today, the ruling party would secure an even bigger majority. I'm sure of that. I mean, from what I have been reading about the political or the popular, support for even Sinjin.
And if you really think about it, does it really make any difference to our lives?
No.
Materially?
None at all. None at all.
Mr. Rajiv Narvekar. First question is about the Prime Minister spoke about 15th August about the population. And what do you think, is it importance, or we talked about demographic dividend, how things, or the fertility rate going down, does it make any sense talking about it? That's the first thing. Second thing is what you just spoke about. I'm a bit disturbed the way you put it. You're saying, how does it matter to me if Kashmir is a problem? I mean, this is our country. For 70 years, they have been used to the people who have been coming there, they have not given voting rights. The Hindus have been, the Pandits have been thrown out, atrocities being committed, the minority over there not getting their rights. A soldier who is standing there, why is he standing there? I mean, I didn't like the way you put it across. I mean, you might have to say something, but that is not the way to put it across. When you say, how does it matter to me? How? Because it is our country. Nation should come first, then other things should follow. Thank you.
I think nation should come first, but is that why there is such widespread support for the detentions that are happening in Kashmir? Nation should come first, and there have been atrocities against minorities, but is that why there is such widespread support for people not getting to communicate with their children, people who have committed no crime, people who also say India comes first, people who support India, even they are not being differentiated against. So I'm not a political analyst, and I don't want to get into the merits of what is happening in Kashmir because I'm not an expert in that subject. My point was different. My point was that when we go to vote, we always vote for India comes first, or we don't always, but of late we are voting for India comes first kind of considerations and putting them above considerations that make our quality of life better. I'm not saying one is superior to the other. I am describing what is happening. And I'm saying that I find it a little strange that people are putting what they think is national interest above what we can be quite sure is their own individual interest. And I find it a little strange I find it a little difficult to believe that people in any country would not put their individual material benefit above a construct on national interest. That's happening, and it is a great success of the political outfit that is able to sell things in this sort of a binary. But I'm not judging it. I'm only describing it.
No, I think demographic dividend part? Yeah. Okay, I'll talk about that a little bit also. No, but I think the way to, I as an academic or as a writer, see, at one level we can look at whatever is happening, whether in Jammu and Kashmir, whether somewhere else, as citizens, as fellow Indians, as Indians. But on the other hand, we are also doing other things like writing on the subject as academics or writers or journalists. Now, when we do that, we have to detach that emotion out of it, is it not? Otherwise, when it comes to, say, politics or economics or anything, once you invest your own biases bias or views into the subject matter, then all is lost in some ways. No, I'm just thinking aloud about it. I'm also reflecting on it. I'm not saying one thing or the other. I'm just reflecting on it. So I have realized that, for example, I might be completely against, removal of Article 370. Emotionally against it, and then I try to explain to myself why. Is it because it is something we have grown up with, right? Having that. And then I start to think about what can it do, what it cannot do. The moment I step into that, I have to, get rid of my own personal views, biases on the subject. So I think that's another way of understanding this. I think we can all agree that, when we think about our place in this nation or this state, we look at both our individual interests and that of the larger interest. But the reason why political leaders get away with everything is because they put their individual interests above public interests. And that does more harm than you and me, putting our individual interests before them. So we might be putting our public interests before everything else, but are our political leaders. In fact, the whole logic of elections and such is to ensure that they put the public interests before their own interests or their party's interests. Now, so
I also want to bring out a little hypocrisy. Sure. I also want to bring out.
No, I'm sure it's.
I also want to bring out a bit of a hypocrisy when I don't care and I litter. I don't care, for the disadvantaged Indians who are my fellow citizens. I don't pay my taxes. People don't pay their taxes honestly. People don't do a whole lot of things that would actually make them patriotic. The only thing that makes them patriotic is the sort of argument that you just gave. Does not quite square up, A genuinely patriotic person also would have a whole hierarchy of priorities where there is so much else to be done. So I do not look at this as, being nationalistic versus, I look at it more in terms of what is the material benefit flowing from something. On the demographic question, what the Prime Minister's address tells us clearly is that the narrative is going to change on demographic dividend. For a long time, economists had been warning that unless corrective steps are taken, the large number of young entrants into the labor force will not be adding to India's economic strength and GDP, and the economic dividend will turn into an economic nightmare because they will have to be taken care of, and they have huge aspirations because of tremendous connectivity, and unmet, those aspirations can turn into something more combustible. And this can be prevented, and to prevent it, we need to create sustainable livelihoods, we need to grow fast, we need to create better quality of life, and all of that is still very, very dependent on policy decisions and reforms. So we must get on with that part of our business. But unfortunately, those policy decisions have not taken place. And therefore, there have been warnings of the dividend turning into a nightmare. And I think the Prime Minister's announcement of population as being something that is not a dividend, but something that needs to be controlled is a big giveaway of how we have missed the opportunity. What more to say?